Hi guys,
Hi.
welcome back to episode 2 of the Zooming Zanni. I'm Ben, this is Bianca from Fools in Progress,
Hello.
and we're joined this week by a very special honorary fool, our guest speaker Olly Crick, who's a performer, director and academic from the UK, specialising in Commedia dell'arte. Hi Olly, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're just wanting to have a chat with you. We're taking a different take with this web series that we're doing, where we want to interview practitioners, performers, and educators of Commedia and find out from a personal point of view what they like and what they do in Commedia that sets them aside from everyone else. And
okay, yeah.
And so, what drew you to Commedia? So,
what drew me to Commedia? I did an undergraduate degree in English and drama, and at some point in that course, one of my tutors mentioned Commedia and gave a brief explanation of it. It wasn't enough. We didn't end up doing a Commedia project at all, but it was enough to make me go, "That's curious. You know, that sounds very interesting." And then I wanted to go into community theatre, but we had Margaret Thatcher hacked to England. So basically all funding for community theatre ended up being cut. So I was going, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I went back into training. I basically did as much training as I could in physical theatre and found this guy who's still alive. He's about 80 now, called Barry Grantham. Whose Commedia training came from two strands. I mean, he was teaching Commedia, one from Old English Music Hall, because him and his wife used to be eccentric dancers. And they do what they call, and they used to do what they call like front of curtain work. So little soft shoe shuffles, all the, wow. So, but he had a very English sense of humor, but he also trained with the Monte Carlo Ballet, so he had all the movements from the ballet associated with Commedia, which I know now is quite late period, but this was fascinating. But it wasn't. It was beautiful to watch, but it wasn't funny. I mean, or rather when Barry did it, because he was a trained comedian and experienced, he was really funny, and when we were copying him, we weren't. So it's like, oh my God, what? Yeah, so copying the move. So there's this thing that went in my head about Commedia that if you just copy someone else's movements, you're not necessarily funny. So that was a bit of a kick up the bottom. Then I was doing some mask training with an English company called Trestle Theatre, who was run by a guy called John Wright, who's written a lot on masks. And he said, have you met these guys, the Unfortunati? And I went, who are they? And they go, oh, they're a little...
Infortunati. Yeah.
Yes, that's right, the Unfortunati. And this is about 1984, so a long time ago, or 1983 or something. And these were a group of Liverpool art students who had to do a project as part of their final year. And they came across the Oreglia book on Commedia, and they said, right.
Yes.
So they said, okay, let's do this as a piece of functional art, because these guys were also members of this strange English society called the Sealed Knot, which reenacts English Civil War battles. So they already wore period costumes, had huge beards, authentic costumes, and went with lots of other people to reenact to reenact all this stuff.
Yes.
So but being art students, they were also very good at making things, so that when I went to see them, they had and they were performing in the portico in Covent Garden in the days when you could busk there. They had a perfect little wooden trestle stage. Their costumes were amazing, and this was the first time I'd seen leather masks. And it was something like, whoa, hang on a minute. Now, they looked amazing. Their performance, their acting ability wasn't brilliant, but it was still watchable because they were art students who'd suddenly... So I introduced myself and I said, where did you learn to act? And they'd done a 2-week course in London under a guy called Carlo Bosso, who and it was just an experiment he was doing. He came to England, an Italian friend of his organised a course, and whoever had heard of Commedia dell'arte basically came along. Now this was, before the internet, so you had to know where the little bits of posters went up. You had to know someone who knows someone. So I was like, who is this guy? Bozo. And what happened is these guys. So I went and met them. They had a little rehearsal in South London. I'd just done a lot of improv training under members of Theatre Machine, who were Keith Johnson's company, Ben Benison and Rick Morgan. So I went along. So I started seeing them regularly, learning from Commedia, and I was teaching them improv. And then they said, "Oh, look, there's a Commedia festival in Paris in 1984. I think it's 1984. Come with us."
Oh.
Come with us. So I said, "Yeah, okay." So we basically camped in a French municipal campsite. About 4 of us went over in a big pink Ford Transit that the company owned, and we saw loads of shows. And some of them were terrible. Some of them were people in Harlequin costumes telling jokes, and you kind of stay awake by in French. So I don't know what's going on. So you stay awake by counting the number of lights, and going, God, bloody hell, I want to get to the bar. And then there was sketches by the Piccolo Theatre of Milan, not the 72 Masters, but some beautiful little sketches directed by their movement director, Marisa Flack, that were kind of like suddenly the physical presence, the physical precision, and the lightness of play began to be really fascinating. And we saw a lecture demonstration by Carlo Bozzo when he was demonstrating all the characters and talking. And he does exactly the same talk now.
In French?
No, in a mixture of French and Italian. He doesn't care. You kind of have to follow him. And then we saw his two companies that he had directed, a Tag Teatro di Venezia and a company called Scalzacani. Tag performed their show The False Magnifico, and within about 10 minutes of it starting, the French audiences were on their seats cheering. And I was like, this is amazing, because the mask technique was fabulous, the stories were great, the costume was great, the staging was good, we were just laughing, the virtuoso skills were brilliant. And it was, the whole show was about 2.5 hours long. It started with a stick dance. There was a first act company of about 8 or 9 actors. In the 2 intervals, first interval they sang part songs in the like madrigals. The second interval, there was, I think there was some more singing and dancing, but all absolute period, madrigals or period sung amazingly. So and at the end of that I was going, that's it, yes, I've seen what I want. And it was and then when we saw the Scalzacani the day after, it was more of the same level of precision but slightly madder, because it was done in a street. It's performed on a terrestrial stage in the French market, and it was more or less an impressionistic show of the development of Harlequin. It's only the French will go, right, we're going to do a street show of the conceptual development of Harlequin, and you kind of go, but it was, there was a young Harlequin developed, died, grew out in a trunk into a new one, and I met the other characters, and it was like, and there was and there were 2 Harlequins, an old and a young one. And the old one was played by a guy called Alberto Nasson, who's I think still around. And Carlo Bosso occasionally uses him to, I think, cow unruly students in his classes, because the guy's brilliant. And you kind of just looking, and the precision of his movement. There was some people in the Scalzacani who were trained at De Creux, so their level of actual physical precision was extraordinary. So that when they were doing these character movements, the level of concentration and precision they did them you were absolutely just fascinated by the movement as well as the storyline. And it was like, I was just going, oh my God, you know, this is comic total theatre. And really ever since then, I've been trying to work out how you get to be as good as Tag, you know, were there.
Yes.
And looking at the dramaturgy, really, which is the cultural information. It sounds a bit dull, but it's the cultural information required to make a show. And it involves the interaction of the different elements of Commedia, whether it's the masks, whether it's improvisation, whether it's languages, whether it's the staging, whether it's where you're performing, what necessary information, and also, you know, the simple training, you know, of it, you know, the level of virtuosity required to create a show, because this isn't, the thing about Commedia is that it's not, it appears an esoteric, magical, distant art, but in fact it's just theatre. So you have to be making good theatre.
Yes, exactly.
Because when I ran a little company called the Fabulous Old Spot Theatre Company. I named after Gloucestershire Pig because it was touring in rural venues in Gloucestershire. And we learnt the hard way that if you had a good show, people went, oh, that's really nice. But if you had an excellent show, people said, are you coming back next year?
Yeah.
You know, and actually, so it's always no pressure, but you always have to be aiming to make your show excellent. And sometimes
we don't want to discourage no one to approach Commedia, but you know.
Well, something quite weird, or almost counterintuitive, we found. We did that back 10 years. Eventually, it died. The company died for actual personal reasons. I was having a divorce. My dad died, and for some reason we had a terrible actress on board whom we couldn't make better. So that was like, you know, anyway, 10 years. Okay. Bye. But we found that if you called it Commedia, this was like small scale community venues. If you called it Commedia dell'arte, people A, assumed it was elite theatre, B, didn't have a clue what you were talking about, or C, had some idea what Commedia might be. So they came with preconceptions. So if they're thinking it's all Les Enfants du Paradis and Jean-Louis Barrault doing his amazing stuff.
We wish they come with this idea. It's even worse sometimes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So they come along with an idea in their heads, and we're not that. You know, so there's a problem. So we just stopped calling it Commedia.
And say we don't actually do Commedia dell'arte.
Well, it is. Well, no, we just decided not to. We decided just not to. I mean, it's different if you're going into a school or a drama college or a conservatoire, because, you know, you are using their Commedia to engender some particular skill or response or physical awareness in a student. If you are entertaining the general public and you're saying, we are going to make you really laugh with something from the, you know, 17th century Italy, you know, they're going, oh my God, it's like Shakespeare, but in a foreign language. You know, so you're kind of going, we're not on a winner here in actually what we have to sell. We go, oh, it's fantastic, it's Italian improvised comedy. And those are things that really appeal to performers. But, you know, the general public are kind of like, what's that? So what we tried, I mean, the big thing we tried to do, which has kind of started off my academic research with Old Spot, is we kind of went, we asked the question, okay, to an Italian, pantaloni da bisognosi, mercanti da Venezia, pantaloni da bisognosi, the merchant of Venice, is almost a folkloric figure. Italians know what people from Venice are like. You know who Pantaloni is. He's an old man. He's an old merchant. You instinctively know that. But if you say you know, if you say pantaloni di bisognose, you know, to an Englishman, they go, what?
What?
And
You
one of the
say
problems.
it's a merchant from Venice. They say, oh yeah, it's the merchant.
Yes, okay, but that's an idea.
Yeah.
It's an idea, you know, that, you know, it's like when you first study Shakespeare or any Renaissance drama, the first problem you have is, why is somebody called Antonio? You know, why not Anthony? You've got all strange names and things. So it becomes a barrier to the idea that the Commedia mask and body should be instant communication.
Yeah.
So what we basically did is we kept all the characters, but we moved them into Gloucestershire and gave them Gloucestershire names, so that they weren't a barrier. And we tried to find an equivalent social position within our county. Now, Gloucestershire is rural, unlike Venice. So if you think of a Commedia show, it's generally set in Venice because that's where Pantaloni lives, so it becomes urban. So instead of having a merchant, we had a farmer.
Yeah.
So, but right, and round our way, the mindset of a farmer is exactly the same as Pantaloni.
Yes.
You know, it's exactly, I need to keep my money. I'm a little bit old. Everyone can bugger off.
You never know what's going to happen.
Incredibly precious. Yes. I'm going to marry her off to raise my status. You know, it's like all the local farmers around our way saying, "Oh, I'm really dead broke, Oliver. I've got no money. Right, we can only afford 2 weeks in Florida this year." You know, and you're kind of going, "You're not broke." You know, but you know they. Yeah. So what I was trying to do, and some of the shows I think we did it quite well, is that we took the relationships between all the Commedia characters and we moved them into another area, and we stopped calling it Commedia. And the thing is, if you talk to the bookers in village halls, this isn't like a theatre booker who will go, "Oh yes, masks, wonderful," or whatever. Or hang on a minute, we haven't got a mask. We haven't programmed a mask show this year, so very good. You can be in. You can be it, or whatever. You get conversation like, "Oh, masks. Oh, isn't that going to frighten the children?" And you kind of, and the response is, "Well, that's the point, isn't it?" Is not something they want to hear. So in fact, we stopped talking about masks and we stopped mentioning Commedia. Yeah. And nobody ever said anything about the masks being scary, apart from, "Wow, can we look at them afterwards?"
Yes.
I mean, we did a pirate show. We call it Pirates of the River Severn. It was basically Commedia pirates in Gloucestershire. And because we had, better masks, we used a mixture of Commedia masks and Balinese masks for the pirates because they have the terrible front teeth.
Yeah,
they'd have all this. In the interval, all the kids and some of the adults used to rush the stage to pick up the swords and the, and stuff like that. It's you can get, there's a level with Commedia of you have to get the booking, and then the theatre has to be really good.
Yeah.
And then they just see the way the masks work, as apart from having to explain to someone about a mask.
Yeah, we're facing the same trouble, the same conundrum. When we say, okay, this is Commedia dell'arte, and everybody who knows, even just a little bit, they have their own idea, and they say either they like it or not like it. So we're facing this dilemma, or dilemma. How do we advertise our show? How we, and because once the audience is there, they love it. It's not that they don't like it.
Once they're there, they enjoy it.
Once you say something so funny, it's like Shakespeare. You said before, like this.
Yes.
It's like Shakespeare, but it's funny. Okay, it's really funny. And then we try to.
And then on top of that, how do you hold an audition? How does a Commedia dell'arte company audition for a Commedia dell'arte experienced actor without getting clowns, circus performers, stand-up comedians, mimes? Like,
Yes. Well, I can respond from my experience to both your things. To both things. The first thing to Bianca is that if you're performing in schools with a drama curriculum that has Commedia, that isn't a problem.
Yeah.
When you're taking shows outside, once you've crossed out the words, Commedia dell'arte and maybe even masks, you're left with things like fast comedy, and things like that. So you're selling it. So like, so now I would recommend, that you try and find words like, comedy. We stopped even saying theatre in the village halls, where we used to say a good night out.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it's, because the thing about a mask is it's not acting. I mean, this is research. A mask is literally, when a mask is alive, it's not acting. It operates on the same time scale and on the same time frame as the audience. So it is a bit more like stand-up. So you've got this weird mix of acting and masks in it. So you're giving the audience a real experience. That's a literal thing. So you can call it a good night out. The best ever review I think we got from a member of the audience in a feedback slip was, you guys are like Shakespeare but funny.
Yes.
So we called ourselves, so we had a strapline which was, in a theatre from the merry England that never was. So that people went, oh look, it's old time theatre, and we made sure we looked like old time theatre. So we had a little trestle stage and a nice backdrop. So people go, oh look, it's theatre. And then we had period costumes. People go, oh, it's nice old fashioned theatre. Then you can start to make them laugh. I mean, maybe calling it, I know, Renaissance comedy, or the jokes Shakespeare didn't dare to tell. You've got to be slightly cheeky. It's almost, you're daring the audience to come to it. Where do you find Commedia actors from? God knows. Well, no. One of the interesting things is, I was talking to the head of No Fit State Circus, or the ex-head of No Fit State Circus, a long time ago. They used to be friends. Well, no, they are friends. Just haven't seen them for a bit. And we're talking about the difference between actors and Commedia performers and circus people. And there are differences between actors and performers. Now, an actor is trained in a drama school. They're very expressive, wonderful, very good skills. They're looking for an agent to get them a job in the theatre. That's what they're trying to do. A performer is someone who goes, I want to perform, has learned the skills and understands that if there's a show that happens, you have to make the costumes, you have to sell the publicity. It's like, who are committed to the idea that if you want to make a show, you have to put everything together for it, sell it, make the costume, whatever. So you are kind of looking, you're looking for performers. We had a couple of actors who came on one show, one actor on one show, who, in order to get to a venue, a tractor had to tow our van through a farmyard because it had just rained, so the farmyard was muddy. There's a beautiful little amphitheatre, the wrong side of a huge pool of mud. So the tractor towed our van, and this guy was sitting in the cab crying, because he wanted a nice warm theatre to come onto stage. So I suppose you're looking for the kind of mad people, the people who are self-motivated, and I think that creates an issue, because if you're looking for self-motivated people, you have to form a collective, because you can't tell self-motivated people what to do, because they just won't. So there's always a period of negotiation. With Old Spot, when we started, I was lucky enough to be members of an actors group associated with the theatre. So I'd seen the way quite a few people had worked. So that we had a couple of development weeks that, God, about 15 years ago there was money, so that we worked with a whole bunch of people, and then I chose a cast. Then what happened is, on the first show, not everybody wanted to do the second show for, you know, I want to get a proper job and things like that. But people recommended other people whom they thought, okay, would fit in. It was kind of how we did it, so that it was, you know, someone who'd been in the van and done 4 or 5 shows a week in different places, who knew the way we rehearsed, who knew that we had a storyline, but we were making all the gags up, and we had reasonably good kit that we were doing it with. So that people came on recommendation, and actually that worked, except for one person, you know, sadly. You know, so you still do every so often have to have auditions, and you have to look, you know, can they improvise? You know, I mean, we always worked like it's a Carlo Bosso method. We start with a storyline that somebody writes, and it's a storyline that's divided into scenes, so you know who's on when and what. You know, a classic Commedia Canovaccio or scenario. For those people who don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically a storyboard of a show. So you write a comedy, okay, just by storyboarding or by indicating the action. The rehearsal process is negotiating with the actors the best way to do it. And that's always a combination of me or you as a director of going, no, that should happen there, and trusting the actors to put their own funny bits in. So, you know, and stuff they want to do, or you know, if someone is good at playing a character, let them play a character, encourage them to play the character, make that character bigger, so that it might not be what you saw in your head at first, but if they're good at holding an audience and they tell the story, then you're starting to develop a situation whereby, you know, everyone in drama schools, they talk about the actor creator. When, you know, the actor is responsible, you know, for their own comedy. You've given them a story, or you've written them a story that will give them the opportunity to shine on stage. And then the rehearsal process is finding the best way, not that an anonymous actor would do it, but that actor would do it, but the way that particular actor would do it.
What we found sometimes a bit difficult is to create a canovaccio, so a performance, a stage performance when in front of the audience, and to be able to discipline the times of the single performer, because sometimes we have, you know, you have actors that, you know, they take over. And that's a problem, because sometimes you find a very good and extremely funny actor or performer, but is taking too much of a space. So that's also what you have to find. You have to find, because Commedia is democratic in a way, you know. So we all are 10 people, we are 8 people, and we have 10 minutes each, and the play will last 80 minutes. So if you take 15 minutes,
it can go hideously wrong.
So this sometimes, and it's so bad, because you know that you will have to cut off a very good actor, but because he cannot discipline himself or herself.
Yeah, I think well, it depends on training. Have you trained with Philip Gaulier at all ever? I mean, this guy Philip Gaulier, he's a very good teacher. He's really hard, and one of his things is, if you're boring, okay, you get off stage, right? So one of the disciplines you learn with him is like in clown. No, it's not the hook. He's sitting there, and you start to do your thing, and he goes bang, 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 third bang, you're off.
Oh my God. I would love to do something like this.
So it's frightening. It's frightening, because he is merciless. But what it is that you need to get a little discipline. One, I think, like if you're improvising a scene, there's always a beginning and a middle and the end. And you need one of the things about a Commedia performance is you're not serving yourself, you're serving the audience.
You're serving the play.
You're serving the play, so that you have a story arc. If it's going well, yeah, by all means carry on with that scene, but you've got to have a fixed end, so that the actors next on are welcomed into the space. They're not having to fight you to get on stage. So that we had a rehearsal idea that we had fixed islands, like within a Commedia scenario. So there were things that always happened the same way, whether it was a song, a latsy, a fight.
Yes.
And we extended these islands to entrances and exits, like, you know, queue lines.
Yes.
So, you know, and sometimes the queue line was signaled from off stage, sometimes it was from on stage. And it's just so there's a discipline that we're telling the story. And even if you knew you could carry on for a bit, to leave the stage buzzing with energy was a gift for the next person coming on.
Of course, yes.
Now, while I was interviewing people for my PhD, which was simply, I don't know, what do you think, you know, in a nutshell, I was asking Commedia practitioners, like, what on earth do you think you're doing this Commedia thing, and how do you do it? In order to get a picture of what people thought, you know, modern Commedia was. And specifically from America, they had this thing, the dell'arte people, thank you Ron Lind, thank you Jane Shirley, and actually also Annie Ryan, they had this thing which they called triangulation, which, you know, it's, you know, basically two actors on stage and the audience.
Okay.
Now basically what it is if I know, you know, hand one, you know, is very good when he's angry, okay, well, my job as hand two is to make that actor angry, but I'm not making them angry for the person. I'm making them angry so they amuse the audience. So that always I am working for the part, okay, for my partner. I'm giving them the stuff that allows them to entertain the audience. Then they, you know that I'm very good at being embarrassed. You know, so they go, oh, you would say that, wouldn't you? What about you and your mother? Yeah. You know, so rather than, oh, I'm playing the audience, it's how can I get the best out of the person I'm working with? And I think from conversations that, you know, that's also with them. It's something that takes a while to, you know, that's company training. You know, it's kind of, that's a way to, you know, it's a rehearsal method, but sometimes it takes a while to sink into an actor how it actually works because it's a method.
And to learn the other actor's strengths, because
I'll come out yes,
these are my strengths. Give me the opportunity to be angry, and I will be angry for the entertainment and pleasure of the audience.
Yes.
Bianca and I picked up on that quite well over the last few years. We do that quite well with each other. Instigate each other's strengths. But it's doing that en masse, which is the magic of Commedia.
Well, it's the hardest thing. I mean, you know, we always tried with Old Spot. We always tried to keep the same company together for the next year. We never quite succeeded. I think because we couldn't quite pay a full wage, you know, for the week. So people were always looking for something else. But we always managed to keep 2 or 3 people from the last show. So, you know, so there was always, you know, there was always a core of people who knew how to work together, and that became, you know, so it became easier to fit in the third person.
To insert new people in a play that you already perform, like, you know, last year you performed a certain play, and then you miss 3 people out of 5, and you have to replace these people. We found that sometimes it's easier to stage a new play than to put in other people in old roles. You know, it's something that, you know, it's like discombobulating the whole rhythm of the play.
Well, it depends. It kind of depends on your business plan. I think, because we had a plan we never managed to carry out, which was we do a big, you know, community tour, which I know the first time we did it was just 10 bookings, and the last time we did it was 70. So, you know, that was building up over 7 or 8 years to get that. And our idea was to make the show work really well in village halls, which we like doing, and then the following year we take it into theatres and make, you know, and go national with it. Now, as you say, it was always when it became clear that people from last year didn't want, you know, to carry on, we realised that in order to get the show as good as it was when we finished the last tour would take a 4-week rehearsal period. So actually it was more fun to write a new show, you know. If if you've got 4 weeks, if you can afford 4 weeks paid rehearsal because you've looked at your income from gigs, and you know, and that's all you can pay actors, you can't afford an 8-week rehearsal period in order to get a new show for this year, and and bring up an old show to how good it was last year with new performers in it. It's one of those kind of things. As soon as you break a certain level of kind of, you know, income, you can hire better people, or you can hire a better quality of actors sometimes that you can just, you know, tell them what to do, and because they're a good actor, they'll do it. So I think that's one of the things that actually blew me about TAG, is they just hit a point when they were producing big shows and filling out big theatres. But you know, they started, you know, as a small collective before Carlo Bozo started directing them.
Yes. When Commedia wasn't even performing in Italy, because Commedia was something that it was almost completely disregarded in Italy, which is
until Strella and Bozo and Giovanni Poli all went, you know, we are putting, you know, it's a cat, it's fine.
Yeah, she's just gonna knock over the camera if she doesn't get detention.
All right.
Oh, I put off the light.
And she did. And there goes the focus. There you go.
There's the light.
And there's a gondola behind your shoulder.
Okay, done?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you blind? I'm blind.
Oh, get out. Don't come back.
I've always wanted the spotlight. It's okay.
Now she's out. Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, you know, there's two kind of aspects to, you know, Commedia now, I think. You know, well, no, there's many aspects to it, but you know, one aspect is it's a very good training method to sell for drama schools and to schools. You know, it's it's entertaining. There's a hit you get from the mask. People enjoy doing that. The effect of the mask on the body is a really good way of training actors to use their body. You know, that's we know that. You know, in the Commedia community, it's our bread and butter. Sometimes is actually the teaching. How we introduce Commedia to the outside world and get an income that's worth something from actually performing. Well, I will try. How long have we got? Because I realise I've been talking a lot.
No, I'm really happy.
We've still got.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. I will try and put this as briefly as possible. Commedia. I mean, and it relates to the old spot work. It relates to the little talk I gave when I came to talk to International Commedia Day in Sydney. It's Commedia seems to be, from people I've talked to around the world, everyone seems to think it's a theatre of place. Like it relates very much to where it's happening. Okay, if you need to explain what's going on to people, and I don't mean a prologue, you know, ladies and gentlemen, in Verona we have, if you had to explain that we're going to be masked, we're going to be funny, that's not going to happen. So one of the things is, I call it comic gestus or comic gestus, like, gestus after the Brecht term. And what I also call that body shape. Now, this means that when a character comes on, any character comes on, their costume, their mask, their body language, their body shape needs to be so refined that there is absolutely no doubt in the audience's mind who that person is. Right. So Pantalone in Venice, everyone gets that.
Yes.
Okay. Pantalone in England, we get that he's an old man and a bit of a miser, but we don't get everything about him. So I think one of the historical reasons why Commedia was so successful in the area it developed was because all the characters came from areas that everyone else knew about, right? Okay, so if you look at a map of northern Italy, you know, it basically within 100 miles you've got of each other. You've got Bologna, you've got Venice, you've got Turin. So you've got, you know, the lovers, you've got
Ferrara,
the
Modena,
and and we all have our attitudes about people from the other place, especially if you're in Italy. It's like people from the south, people from Naples, man, they're all criminals, and stuff like that. So there's a sense of, if that happened as one of its strengths historically, how do we do that now?
Yes.
So the thing is, if you are working in Sydney, if you're working in Melbourne, wherever you're working, the show, whether it's a historical Melbourne or the show happens there, and somehow those types, these economic types, have to hit an audience's
absolutely. They have to resound
on a visceral level. Now you can almost think of this as prejudice, because it's like, I'm a very right on person, I don't particularly think, but actually you are playing with audiences' preconceptions, like that, like a little bit, old men behave like this, young teenage drunks, behave like this, you're playing with and basically Brecht, you talked a lot, but you have to encapsulate that in the body language. And I think this is what a mask does as well. So the first thing is, your character types have to be local enough to get an instant hit from the audience. So there isn't it's not, I understand this is a Sydney banker. It's that's a banker, which is a costume, a mask, whatever it goes on. The second thing is, like, I thought you can go for entertainment. What is the purpose of your show? Are you entertaining people? Are you engaging them, or are you using Commedia as an ideology? Are you?
Sometimes we have this desire to really to come up with something that is totally inherent to the happening in everyday's life, like now we have this make Commedia great again.
Well, the thing is, if you just try and entertain people, that's a skill, okay? Now what I call engagement, I call it, there's a spectrum that goes from entertainment to an ideology. Entertainment is just jokes, it's slapstick. Pantalone, hits the Zanni, it's funny. Engagement is, we are looking, all that happens, but it happens within the context of a historical Sydney, for instance, so that all the characters in it are representing of a social class, okay, within Sydney. And if you know what the local concerns are in that town, and it's your business as an actor to know, then you map all the concerns onto the characters, so that the banker is trying to develop, it's trying to build bigger high rises, around the harbour. It's trying to get rid of some of the restaurants or whatever. That immediately has an effect on the Arlecchino who's actually working at the restaurant. That immediately upsets Pantalone, or who owns a franchise in some of the restaurants. And if these are all issues that are affecting the people of Sydney, they will see in your play a comic representation of their city. Now, it can be in period costume. It doesn't have to be modern costume. The whole modern costume is a problem because the historical costumes fit the mask. The mask and the costume are one thing. So that if you're making modern versions of them, you have to find an aesthetic. You have to get a really classy scenographer in order to make the modern costumes fit the mask. I'm not sure that's I mean, that's God, if if you could get hold of some costume design department,
you will have to change it for every single play.
Yeah. That becomes, well, it's an area I can't comment on, but I think that's where it has to go. So what I'm saying is, if you, I mean, how to make Commedia great again? You set it in the town where you are. Your Commedia characters represent types from that town, and your subject matter is stuff that bothers the people in the town. You don't have to come up with a conclusion. You don't have to come over as and we must give all the land back to the Aboriginals and come back to England or Australia or wherever we come from. We don't have to make that. But all we're doing is we're putting these issues on the agenda, open for the audience. They are listening to, they are watching you to think this is funny. There's lots of running around and eating, and I can love and all the Commedia stuff that is funny, but underlying that there's something that makes them want to watch because it's their town being put on display. They can't help but watch. So my what I'm kind of working on is trying to produce a little pamphlet that says, every single town or county in the whole world ought to have its own Commedia company, whose job is to. Fantastic. We work together once a year and it'll be mad. But
2 years ago, we had this production of the Unthinkably Unsinkable Boat, which was inspired to the sink of the Titanic. But it wasn't the Titanic, actually. It was
the Costa Concordia.
Oh, no. It was the Commedia, the ship called Concordia, which is
That's the one that went, didn't it? That's the
and so it was.
The captain was asleep and they went too close and they didn't they?
Yes, but we were slapped on the face for doing so by the Italian.
You were slapped in the face by doing that.
Where we were like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, because it was a very hot topic at the time, and if it was Dario Fo doing a show like this, it would have another Nobel Prize.
Maybe you just have to be cunning. Maybe you're telling a story of a cruise ship from the 17th century.
Yes, well, Titanic was too close to our times, probably.
Yeah.
So that was our.
We made some very direct references to that were not at all disguised.
Well, this is interesting because one of the specific dilemmas that you'll always face, or I always face with a Commedia show, is as soon as you put it into period costume and you start making contemporary references, the audience's belief in the period costume dies a bit.
Up to a certain point, yes.
So that you have to be cunning and I think a little bit witty about your references to things. It's one of those things. It's trust the intelligence of your audience. However many times you've been disappointed in doing that. It's kind of trusting to make the connections themselves. As in, there's a big, cruise ship that's, just on a reef just over there, and we have a little model ship of an ancient little galleon or something that's, bumped into an island here. And we don't mention it, but the audience
there's just so many moments in that event that were so Commedia, we couldn't avoid sinking our teeth into it. Like the captain got distracted by the mistress, and so he crashed the ship because he wasn't at the wheel, and then decided to get off the ship before everyone else because it was dark on board. So,
Dark that's right. It was dark.
Yeah.
It was inevitable.
Yeah, it was too. It was
calling that.
It was just dying for it.
Yes. But yes, it wasn't really well received, but it's okay, you know.
Lots of people loved it, but then a few people were a bit,
like,
it was too soon.
Yeah, it was
too soon.
Well, I mean, sometimes I know someone says you don't know who, you don't know how good your comedy is until you realise who you've offended.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's written by people with a very good stable income with nothing to do with comedy.
It's better forgiveness than permission is another one of my favorites.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to play it as comedy. I mean, another of the issues that I come across in Commedia, and they're kind of related, is the fact that the thing we always remember about Commedia is all the laughs and the jokes and the Lazzi. But the thing that keeps the audience there while all the jokes are actually happening is a storyline. And you have to make the audience care about the characters, which involves acting. And as I was just immersing myself, like quite some time ago, in all the literature and the way people perform and different styles of Commedia, and also historical pronouncements on what was comedy and what was tragedy. In the middle of the Scala, the Flaminia Scala scenarios, there's a couple of scenarios that are called their genre is tragicomedia ridiculosa, a ridiculous tragicomedy. Now, an awful lot of paper has been spent writing what a tragicomedy is. Right, the Académie Française at one point made a pronouncement that there was a genre of tragedy and there was a genre of comedy, but there was no genre of tragicomedy. That was that was a non-thing. And I'm kind of going, if you're building up for a really good joke, or a really good plot joke in a scenario, the amount of stage time you have to use to create the belief and the seriousness that something terrible is going to happen, that has to be sold to the audience. So, the audience has to believe that. It's almost, you've got a 50-50 split between in terms of time spent on stage, between setup, which is, a Turandot, for example, is almost a tragicomedy, because we have to believe that all the other suitors are being chopped off, before, this guy, finds the right answer. So there's a point when you are taking the issues of, of the Concordia absolutely seriously, but there's all this other weird stuff that's going on. So that you don't necessarily have to be mocking the event. You are simply showing that this is happening, but the servants are doing something stupid, at the same time. There's another plot going. Carlo used to say, there's three plots going. There's the senior lovers, there's the vecchio, and there's the servants, and you've got three sets of plots going on. So that you can set a tragic plot, going. I mean, and what I think the problem that the Académie Française had with tragicomedy is that it was what the Commedia dell'arte performers did. It wasn't an official category. In order to get a really good laugh, you have to sell the dilemma. And that's the business of tragedy. And then instead of saying, and the king was executed, but before he executed, he made this really noble speech about, like how we should all behave, and the reason I'm dying is because I didn't behave like that. It's not, it takes a better writer than me to do that. I know the trapdoor breaks and he escapes, and that's where Harlequin was keeping his collection of cats. So suddenly the king escapes and all the cats get out. So that's more of a cartoon idea. But so you're looking, so you're kind of looking at not at taking the subject matter absolutely seriously, but there are various things which you take equally seriously. That's subverted. Hang on a minute, sorry. Amazon parcel, 2 minutes.
Amazon parcel, okay.
Very important to get the home shopping.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm back.
Did you read all the books that are behind you?
Yes.
Good dog.
Every one of them.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sidetrack. Bitumen.
Oh, wow.
Liquid bitumen, because I've right in lockdown. I'm
Oh
getting
yeah,
back
I saw your new mask, you know.
Yeah. So basically, this was shoe polish, but it's using papier mâché. But anyway, so rather than
okay.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
so what I was trying to do with this, because one of the another issue with another area, not issue, but an area of I'll get the mask of interest is in terms of engagement is the models we have for our Commedia masks are based on a late Renaissance and Baroque social structure.
Mm-hmm.
So are those masks, if we think of Commedia as a form of cartoon style theatre, rather than it must have Pantalone, the Doctor, the Capitan, rather than it's a fixed form with the 9 masks or 10 masks or whatever. There is some dispute. But are the Renaissance power structures the same as they are now? And I was doing a little bit of what I call action research, which was I was putting on all the masks without doing the voices, just the shapes in front of groups of people and asking the question, who is this in your town? Right. Or kind of, who do you think this is? And the mask of Pantalone, which in traditional historical comedy is always the powerhouse. It's always everything goes to Pantalone. Everybody was seeing as an old man with no power and no social agency.
Yes.
And I was going, but Pantalone's a banker. And then I started thinking, what do bankers look like now? Now everybody works out. Everybody wears sharp suits. Unless you're really old, like Rupert Murdoch. Everybody is now upright and they work out and they have sharp suits. There's very few.
You are extremely old. Yeah.
So
all lifting.
Yes.
And,
So if you're beginning to create like a gestus or a comic gestus for like a power figure of a banker, now someone who controls money, it's a different body shape, and stuff like that. So what I was trying to do with this mask was to create something that was like Pantalone, but a bit younger and a bit more fierce. So the problem I had with this was instead of using bitumen, I was using shoe polish, using brown shoe polish for one thing. And shoe polish, this is just pure technique. I discovered this particular brand of shoe polish. If you thin it and if you clean it and polish it, it goes slightly pink. So this, and I was looking for trying to give it like lilac and darker colors to make it more merciless. So this guy has got a little bit of because of the color. It's got a bit of cheerfulness in it.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, what I was looking for was that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's more wolfy. Yeah.
It's still the lightness of it. So I'm sort of experimenting with not quite hybrid masks, but thinking, but looking at how we just slightly adapt the
old-fashioned
masks. It's because there are versions of Harlequin masks, there are versions of Pantalone masks, and they're all derived originally from the first masks that Sartori made, and for the piccolo. In fact, we're all in some extent doing versions of the because the Sartori mask went to the Cock School, people copied those masks. There were early Zanni masks made in Venice by a guy called Giovanni, or made for productions by a guy called Giovanni Polli, who was a guy because we all play a lot with the Zanni character now in Commedia workshops, but in terms of the way Commedia got developed from about 1946, most of it comes from the Piccolo Theatre of Milan and Lecoq work from that. And then you get the Zanni actually came from a guy called Giovanni Polli, and the bridge between that was Carlo Bosso, who trained with both. And there are links, you know, if you look up Giovanni Polli on the internet, there are some links of his kind of, you know, there's a 1959 Italian broadcast called, you know, about Commedia dell'arte, and it's all Giovanni Polli Zannis, you know, which is the too.
Yes.
Have you guys got one final question that I'll try and answer quickly?
You actually, I had 6 questions written down here, and we've actually covered all of them without needing to be queued. So, yes. You've done amazing. Exactly right. Thank you so much for your time, Olly. We really appreciate it. It was great to see you again.
Yes, well, I hope to see you again. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much.
Welcome down at any time.
And Bianca's Black Cat. Ciao.
Ciao. That was the 2nd episode of Zooming Zanni. Next week, we will be back again. So thank you for joining us. Again, if you've got any questions, please hit us up on social media. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week.
Ciao.
Ciao.